Hello friends, welcome back again. In this video, I am going to show you how you will prepare the labs to install or deploy Openshift cluster platform. So as I discussed earlier, we are going to cover these topics in this video tutorial series, and this time we are going to set up the labs. So I have created a one diagram. Here initially we will start from this environment, and whenever we will move to the topics, we will add or change this diagram and do the configuration. So initially I'm going to start from the 4 nodes. From the 4 nodes, 2 will be the worker nodes where your actual pods will be running. Here we have the one master only. As of now I am not using any HA high availability for the master, so we will do that one later on. So accordingly we will change the diagram and configuration. So I am going to start initially with 4 nodes. So 1 will be master, 2 will be workers. So whenever you will deploy the pods or applications, that application will be exposed from the infra node. So here my routers as well as the Docker registry, Openshift internal registry will be running here. And whenever you will deploy the application, that will be exposed by using this node to the outside world. So this is just a basic diagram which we are going to start the deployment of the Openshift cluster, and later on we will add here multi masters and multi infra nodes, so it can be configurable for the HA Openshift cluster. So I hope this diagram is very clear to you guys. Let me show you the machines setup. So I am using the VMware workstation here, where I have created the 4 machines. One is the master, one is the node 1, one is the node 2, and one is the node 3. So master name is very clear. Here my master server or service will be running, but node 1 will be acting as a worker node, node 2 will be acting as a worker node, and node 3 will be my infra node. So node 3 is responsible to allow the traffic for your application to the outside world, because as I mentioned here, our routers as well as the Openshift internal registry will be running. So we say this is the infra node. Okay, so to configure these machines before setup, so what I would like to do, I would like to give you the overview about the minimum hardware requirements. This is the minimum requirement to set up the Openshift cluster. So we have the you can have the physical or virtual system or instance running on public and private cloud as well. As I mentioned, it's across platform, so you can have the physical machines, you can have the virtual machines, or you can have the instance on cloud. Your OS should be RHEL or CentOS 7.3 or later with a minimal installation. So I hope you guys know about the installation type. We have the server with GUI, we have the minimal installation, so they required minimal installation, and errata channel to get the updates. If you don't want to use RHEL, you can go with the RHEL atomic host. So I believe you guys also are aware about the RHEL atomic host, which I have already described about it. I can give you a brief introduction about this one here as well. So just like it's a small footprint of the RHEL OS, which has just a capability to run the containers. So for example, you have the RHEL where you run the KVM virtualization, but if you don't want to use the full OS, there is another way. You can use the hypervisor, which is called RHEV. So you can just use the hypervisor to run your VM. So just like the atomic host, it is the small footprint of the OS which has just the capabilities to run the containers. It required minimum of 4 virtual CPUs. So remember that it is the configuration for the master, and additional are strongly recommended. So it will depend on your workload and the planning, but minimum it required 4 virtual CPUs. It also required minimum 16 GB of RAM. Additional memory is strongly recommended. Again, it will also depend on your workload. Minimum 40 GB disk space in where. So this is the minimum. Minimum 1 GB of the hard drive space in USR local bin. Minimum 1 GB hard disk space in file system, which is containing the temporary directories. Master with co-located etcd required a minimum of 4 core processors. So if you have decided to run etcd as well as the master services on same node, so it required minimum 4 cores or processors. So this is the minimum requirement to run the master. And here you have the nodes. So where your worker nodes or your infra nodes. So it required again physical, virtual or instance on the cloud. Again OS will require 7.3 or later with the minimal installation, or you can choose atomic host, which is not less than 7.4.5. It required the network manager 1.0 or later version. It required at least 1 virtual CPU. If you have more, that will be great for you, because your actual pods or applications are going to be run on nodes. It required minimum 8 GB of RAM. It required minimum 15 GB of disk space in where. It required minimum 1 GB disk space in USR local bin, and again 1 GB disk space for the temporary files. An additional minimum 15 GB unallocated space per system running containers for the Docker storage. So if you would like to create the Docker storage where your containers will be running, you can have a 15 GB unallocated space. So you can define this is the space used for the Docker container images and volumes. So this is, but it's an additional requirement, not the minimum. If you have decided to run the master servers on different node and etcd on different node, so here you have the external etcd, minimum 20 GB hard disk space for the etcd data, and hardware requirement is again like a 2 virtual processor and 8 GB of RAM. So it depends, like there is no clear mention, but you can go there and see the etcd documentation. In my case, my master services as well as the etcd data store will be running on the master node, right? So this is the minimum requirement you have to fulfill to run this lab setup. So I believe most of you guys, they are thinking about the resources, like how you will manage the resources. So don't worry, this is the minimum requirement to run the production grade cluster for the Openshift container platform. But here we are just for the training or demonstration purpose. So what we can do, we can pass some parameters in inventory file for the Openshift cluster. Do not check the minimum requirement. So whatever the resources you want to give, you can give. So it will not check the minimum resources on the host, but this is not recommended in the production. Remember, you need to fulfill the minimum system requirements to deploy or install the Openshift container platform. In my case, I am using the VMware workstation where I don't have the much resources. So what I am doing, I am providing 2 GB of memory for my master, 4 processor for my master, 60 GB of disk space I have allotted for slash directly, so most of the like where and USR lab, they will have the enough spaces. There is a one network adapter which is directly connected to a switch, and all these systems are also connected to the same switch. So to prepare the lab in VMware workstation, or you can use the Oracle VirtualBox, the configuration will remain same. While deploying the OpenShift cluster, we will pass parameters. Do not check the minimum requirement for these nodes, otherwise your installation will be failed. So this is the minimum I have supplied in my Oracle VirtualBox. Sorry, not on the VirtualBox, it's a VMware workstation, but it is the same for the VirtualBox as well. The same configuration I have, I believe, for the node 1. So here you can see 2 GB of memory for processor, 60 GB of disk, and that one network adapter. Here 2 GB of RAM, 4 processors, 60 GB of hard drive, and one network adapter. The same is for this one. So this is the lab preparation I have done in my VMware workstation, right? So please do not panic, because I can understand that this much of the resources to maintain in the training environment or just for the learning environment, it's not possible. So this is the requirement just for the production grade cluster. If you have these much of resources, that is very good, because you will get the performance better. You will have the production grade cluster for your learning environment and so on. But if you are lacking in the resources, so you can approach my way. So this is the VM creation you have to do. After creating these VM in the workstation, VMware workstation, or in Oracle VirtualBox, you need to install CentOS 7.5 and with the minimal installation, and upgrade the full OS. So that part I will cover in the next video, how to prepare the nodes for the OpenShift cluster container platform. So this is the lab setup. Try to remember this diagram. We have only started with the 4 nodes, where our 2 nodes are running as a worker, one is running as a master, and one is running as a infra node. Whenever you will deploy the application will be deployed in the form of pods on worker nodes, and your application will be available to the outside cluster with the help of infra node. Master node is the master. So if your master node is failed, you do not have any high availability for the master node. We will come to that point later, so accordingly we will modify this diagram. I hope you enjoy this video, and see you in the next session. Thank you.